Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. Well, it's been quite a 24 hours, right? Wow. What we've seen unfold in the Middle East over the past day or so, who would have thunk it? I mean, only President Trump could swing this deal that just was laid out before the eyes of the world. Obviously, 20 live hostages returned, a day of jubilation yesterday in Israel, history made, incredible. But now that's phase one, and phase one, highly successful. But now comes the really hard work. And we're still basking in the glow, of course, of yesterday, of the triumph of getting the hostages back. And President Trump astride the world stage, speaking at the Knesset, Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking alongside with him. And then President Trump leading the meeting of world leaders in Egypt, talking about the future of not only Gaza, but the region writ large. Folks, the Abraham Accords back on the table in a major way. But what was left unsaid yesterday for the most part, and what everyone else is sort of dreading, is phase two of Trump's Gaza peace plan. Now, phase one, hostages returned. And by the way, another thing that wasn't discussed a lot yesterday was the downside of phase one, Israel releasing, I believe it's about 2,000, maybe more, maybe a bit less, Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails, including a few hundred, at least 200, who were serving life sentences in Israeli prisons. These were hardened Hamas terrorists with loads of blood on their hands that Israel, as part of the deal, had to release. But at the end of the day, they decided, look, to get our hostages back, we'll do it. And that was a bitter pill to swallow, but Israel did it. And the nation is unified right now. I talked to a few Israelis yesterday. And by the way, if you missed our 90-minute special live report on TBN last night, you can check it out here right on the channel. Just go in our archives. It should be right under videos or under newscasts. It's there. Special report, the Gaza peace plan. And we talked to, some heavy hitters on the ground in Israel, D.C., and beyond. And a few of the Israelis who appeared on the show said, look, and by the way, our good friend Yair Pinto of TBN Israel, who you may know, he appears on the show. And several Israelis who we interviewed during the show said, Erick, it feels like 1,000-pound weight has been lifted off our shoulders. The nation of Israel breathed a collective sigh of relief yesterday to have the hostages back. But yes, a very bitter pill to swallow to release Palestinian terrorists in exchange. And now phase two. And the big sticking point for phase two, at least for Hamas, is the demand that Hamas disarm. Folks, this is where it gets very tricky, needless to say. So I present this question to you. We know, number one, that Hamas cannot be trusted. I mean, this is a demonic Nazi death cult. Ronald Reagan, a great man, used to say during the 1980s regarding the Soviet Union, when it comes to dealing with the Soviets, trust but verify. When it comes to Hamas and the Iranian regime and jihadis, don't trust but verify. The question that I pose to our very educated Watchman audience, will Hamas disarm? Very simple. Yes or no. What do you think? And I'll add a sub-question to that. Does Hamas disarm without being forced physically to disarm? Does Hamas lay down its weapons and honor the letter of the law and honor the deal? Or is Hamas forced to lay down its arms, literally kicking and screaming, and there's got to be physical military force used in order to make that a reality? What do you think? Because, again, I know we're all basking in the glow of yesterday, and rightfully so. Israel deserved that day of jubilation, their sons and daughters home. And if you saw the footage, and again, watch my special here from last night. You can check it out in our archives again. It was just last night. The reunion, the scenes of the reunions were, folks, so powerful, tear-jerking, heart-rending, amazing to see Israeli families reunited with their loved ones who'd been living in horrific Hamas dungeons for the past 2 years. I believe it was 738 days. Could you imagine? I'm a father. We've got a lot of fathers and grandparents out here. Could you imagine your child, your loved one, being tortured in a Hamas dungeon? I mean, by the worst of the worst. I mean, a demonic death cult. These are demonic individuals. And then that son or daughter comes home. They're in your warm embrace again. The scenes were so emotional, so incredible. So Israel needed and deserved that day, but there's no time to rest on our laurels, and Israel certainly can't. And President Trump can't either, because right away today, the conversation has shifted. Now what? Does Hamas disarm? And what happens to Gaza next? I presented that poll question to you: disarm, yay or nay, and how do they get disarmed? So let me know in the comments section, number one. Number two, before we dig into that, and I've got some comments about it from President Trump, from the Israeli government, which is already taking steps. They're not very happy so far, the Israelis, about what Hamas is doing. You could say Hamas is already breaking this deal, folks, and this was the concern. Don't trust, but verify, right? So we'll dig into that. And what is Hamas saying about the prospect of disarming? Because look, either way, and I said this last week when I came to you in the run up to the deal, I said either way, if Hamas agrees or doesn't agree to President Trump's plan, it's the end of Hamas as we know it. Either Hamas agrees, they disarm, they're completely defanged, they hand back the hostages, which gives them no leverage now. The hostages are gone. And they are essentially exiled from Gaza, no part in the future governance of Gaza. Either they agree to all of that, or they disagree, they resist, and they are militarily crushed in short order. Either way, Hamas loses, and that's a good thing. But the next few days and weeks could be tricky, and that's an understatement. So we're going to break that down, the disarmament factor. Before I do, if you like what you're hearing, current events, breaking news, mainly from Israel and the Middle East, but we go around the horn all around the world, China, Russia, Europe, the US, and beyond. Be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Folks, we're coming to you most days, sometimes on the weekends as well, depending on the news cycle. And again, it is from an unapologetically biblical perspective. If you like it, be sure to subscribe. Hey, when I think of the aftermath of October 7th and just the blood, the toil that was expended by the people of Israel over the past 2 years to get to the moment we had yesterday, I think of Magen David Adom, our good friends. You've heard them talked about here in the live stream many times. They're our partner for today's live stream. Once again, Magen David Adom is Israel's emergency services system. They are Israel's first responders. Every ambulance that goes out, that's Magen David Adom. They control, collect, distribute Israel's blood supply, not only to the IDF, but to civilians. They dispatch ambulances. They are the first on the ground. Every time there's a terror attack, a rocket, a missile attack, a suicide bombing, God forbid, even a car attack, a heart attack, Magen David Adom are the first ones on the ground in Israel. Again, they are Israel's emergency services system. SaveLivesIsrael.com. SaveLivesIsrael.com. That's how you can support this incredible organization that's doing God's work. Look, folks, since October 7th, again, Israel's been fighting a 7-front war. And the war has come home, not only October 7th, of course, but Iranian missiles and the Houthi missiles. The list goes on. And I'm in Israel frequently. I see those Magen David Adom ambulances everywhere I go. They are doing God's work. It's a largely volunteer force. Imagine that. Some 90% of their EMTs, first responders, are volunteers. They're not getting paid to do this. That makes it even more remarkable what they do and the lives they're saving, the people they're blessing every day. They need your support, though. It is SaveLivesIsrael.com. You want to fulfill that biblical mandate laid out in the book of Genesis, chapter 12, verse 3, to bless the people of Israel. This is the perfect way to do it. Magen David Adom, SaveLivesIsrael.com. I mean, they've lost over 30 volunteers, killed since October 7th, over 17 ambulances destroyed in the line of duty. They're going into the lion's den. SaveLivesIsrael.com. Be sure to check them out. Okay. Well, we have a force right now that's going to be compelled to descend into the lion's den of Gaza once again because Hamas refuses to disarm. I pose the question to you. I know you're commenting and I read your comments, but here's the state of play right now as we enter phase 2 of President Trump's Gaza peace plan. And by the way, before we finish today, I want to talk a bit about the larger ramifications of Donald Trump on the world stage. And some people comment and say, I hate Trump. He's terrible. Well, guess what? Whether you like the president, I happen to like him a great deal. I think he's a great president, a great leader. If you like him or you don't like him, you cannot deny he is arguably the most impactful world leader of the 21st century. And by impactful, what do I mean? Making the biggest headway, the biggest splash, making the biggest difference, making the biggest moves that have a profound global impact. I would say Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, arguably, are the two most impactful world leaders this century. The other one I put up there, you could say for better or for worse. I'd say for worse, of course, Vladimir Putin and all that he's done really since 2008 when he invaded Georgia, Crimea 2014, Ukraine writ large in 2022, and the impact he's had. Xi Jinping of China, impactful in trying to drive China into superpower status, but Trump and Bibi in particular, I've compared them to two Churchillian leaders, two modern day Churchills, who saw the gathering storm of a nuclear Iran, that Iranian axis, that ring of fire. They acted and they destroyed it. I mean, Iran's ring of fire is now a smoldering heap of ruins. They're not completely defeated. Word of caution, they are down and pretty severely, but not out. But they are not what they were, clearly. The other comparison I've made is Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher during the 1980s brought down the Soviet empire without a shot. Now, this took quite a few shots, including, as President Trump would say, those beautiful B-2 bombers back in June, destroying Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. And Trump said yesterday, the Gaza plan and the return of the hostages, he believes, would not have been possible without what happened in June, without destroying Iran's nuclear facilities. It was peace through strength. First comes the strength, then comes the peace. It always works. But look, down but not out brings us to Gaza. Like to see your thoughts there. I'm reading some of the comments here out of the corner of my eye. Hamas must disarm. Hamas so far is choosing not to disarm. Here's the state of play. 20 live hostages released yesterday, we all know. But remember, there were the remains of 28 more hostages who were killed, murdered by Hamas. But Hamas, ghouls that they are, orcs that they are, just demonic, actually held on to the remains of dead people, of dead Israelis, their remains, and use them essentially as hostages. Because in Israel, they want their loved ones back. They want to give them a proper burial according to Jewish tradition and Jewish law. And Hamas refuses to hand them back over. They were supposed to hand over yesterday all 20 living hostages and the remains of those additional 28. Instead, Hamas handed back the remains of only 4 hostages yesterday. And today, apparently, they reportedly sent back coffins with the remains of 4 more. Do the math. There are the remains of 20 Israeli hostages apparently still in Gaza in Hamas's clutches. So that's where we're at. And you think they're going to disarm so easily? Okay. Here's the latest on what we have there. And Israel's responding already. Israel, this is from the Times of Israel, just reading this straight off my phone. Israel will not reopen the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt, and it will limit aid in order to press Hamas for release of the remains of those 24 slain hostages. The families of the captives still in Gaza demand the deal be put on hold until their loved ones' remains are returned. This is a big deal. And you knew Hamas was going to play games. This is what they do. They used to have the elaborate, when they released hostages in prior months, they'd have the elaborate handover ceremonies. Remember that? It was just sick stuff when they'd hand the hostages back. But here we go. The moves to close the Rafah crossing and limit aid into Gaza follow assessments by Israeli defense officials that Hamas has not made, surprise, surprise, significant efforts to return the remaining bodies of the hostages, and comes amid rising anger among the hostages' families, and for good reason. So Hamas is playing games here, and Israel's saying, it's not going to happen. We're not going to let you do this. We're not going to let you play the games. We'll shut the border crossing between Rafah and Gaza, and we'll just cut aid. and we will tighten the vise around you. We will squeeze the noose around your necks until you hand the hostages back. Again, I'm not surprised Hamas is doing this. This is their MO. They're demonic. The word goes without saying when it applies to them. The IDF received 4 caskets, though, today, as I mentioned a minute ago, from the Red Cross, apparently with the bodies of 4 more hostages. So that's 8, the remains of 8 that have been returned, apparently. 20 more. Where are they? So in the meantime, they're already breaking the deal. They were supposed to hand over all 28 hostages, 20 living and 28 dead, and they didn't do it. So when it comes to disarmament, this should not surprise you. Number one, the IDF is saying disarm or else, and rightfully so. But this is interesting, and this kind of escaped media scrutiny the other day. Surprise, surprise. Hamas official, this is from Ynet News, an Israeli publication. Hamas official says, we will not disarm. This was just 3 days ago on October 11th. And rejected, he was quoted anonymously. He said, disarmament is, quote, out of the question. The demand that we hand over our weapons is not up for negotiation. And if you take it a step further, you see what they're doing. Because Hamas right now, here's another report from Times of Israel, has killed over 30 Gazans. You may have seen the footage over the last few days. Killed over 30 of their fellow Gazans. They've publicly executed 7 people as they are reasserting their grip over the Gaza Strip. There's footage, and this emerged over the weekend, of Hamas executing so-called collaborators in the city square, collaborators with Israel in the city square of Gaza City. Armed Hamas fighters are returning to the streets. Now, those armed Hamas fighters, and they're clashing with local militias, apparently. They're carrying out reprisals and revenge killings and rounding up so-called collaborators because they gleefully murder and maim. This is what they do. They're evil, folks. There's no gray areas here. This is what evil does. It murders, it maims to its heart's delight. So that's what Hamas is back to doing. I mean, if they disarm, who are they? If they can't maim, murder, torture, who are they? What's their identity? That's why they exist. Their sole rationale for being is to maim, murder, rape, pillage, and destroy. That's who they are. If you disarm them, they're done. I mean, they're actually done. And President Trump said, oh, you don't want to disarm? Here's what he said today. One second. There it is. Trump, today in a press conference with the Argentinian president, Javier Milei, Trump said, and I quote, I love it, if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it will happen quickly and perhaps violently. President Trump doesn't beat around the bush. You got to love it. And he actually tweeted out earlier, the job is not done because Hamas has violated that 72-hour deadline, as I mentioned, for the return of all hostages, living and dead. Trump said phase 2 begins right now. Now, okay, how does the free world, how does everyone who signed on to this deal, which includes, key point here, ladies and gentlemen, Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt. Turkey and Qatar, obviously Hamas's 2 largest benefactors and supporters, and Egypt plays a double game when it comes to Hamas. The ball should be in their court to ensure that their Muslim brothers, literally Muslim brothers. Look, Turkey and Qatar, hubs of the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan is a Muslim Brotherhood Islamist in Turkey, and Hamas is the self-identified Palestinian wing of, drumroll please, the Muslim Brotherhood. So Turkey and Qatar are the main entities here who could really pressure Hamas to disarm. Does Israel have to go back in? How is this done? How do we ensure that Hamas disarms when they're refusing, some anonymously, I just read you that quote, and some just outright, they're killing so-called collaborators in the streets. This is who they are. How does this work? The disarmament factor. How does phase 2 work? Are we entrusting that to Turkey and Qatar? I don't feel good about that because these are Islamists who've supported Hamas. Israel had to pull back. They maintain that as part of phase 1. They still maintain that security perimeter, thank God, in Gaza to prevent future October 7th. But does Israel go back in a deep way and try to go house to house and disarm Hamas fighters? I don't know if the IDF wants to do that. So what's the mechanism here to make sure Hamas disarms? We can't trust Hamas out of the goodness of their hearts to just disarm. It's got to be Turkey and Qatar and the Muslim world applying pressure and I guess carrots and sticks and promising Hamas perhaps safe passage, exile out of Gaza. Folks, I don't know how it's going to look, but it's got to happen. And President Trump is saying it's going to happen. If we have to violently disarm them, we will. I don't think you'd see the United States getting directly involved there. What it could be is President Trump saying to the IDF, you know what? Go ahead. They don't want to disarm. Bibi, do what you got to do. Now, Turkey, Qatar, the Muslim world, the Arab world, who all signed on to this deal, basically, other than Iran, everyone signed on to this deal, other than Iran and Syria. They won't like Israel to go back into Gaza. And the bigger story here is the Abraham Accords. And folks, by the way, one way or the other, Hamas will be disarmed. Whether they lay down their arms under pressure from other Islamists who say, look, you'll live to fight another day. If you lay down your arms, you know, it's a long game we're playing. 20 years, 10 years, you'll be in charge of Gaza again. Does Hamas roll with that? Or does Hamas want to dig in and conduct a guerrilla campaign? We're about to find out. But the bigger question here, and the bigger factor, I should say, the Abraham Accords. President Trump made very, very clear yesterday throughout that it's a new Middle East. He wants to see a new Middle East. And the Gaza campaign, Hamas, was a sticking point there. Now the Saudis, perhaps even Syria, Lebanon, Indonesia, which isn't in the Middle East, but it's the world's most populous Muslim nation. It's all on the table. Peace negotiations, treaties between them and Israel. It could be a very exciting time of peace and prosperity for the region. But caveat there, the prophetic implications. I think you will see. I think Israel right now is the regional superpower. Israel is a world power, despite its small size. Israel is a world power, no doubt. And I think perhaps the main reason President Trump's life was spared in Butler, PA, by God Almighty, and President Trump has acknowledged that many times, God spared my life, is for this moment. Ending conflicts like he's doing, blessing Israel like he's doing. And also, look, things are being set up for a future date. There's not always going to be peace and prosperity in the Middle East, as we all know, if you know the word of God, until the Prince of Peace returns, Jesus. But in the meantime, we could be in a window here. I hope it lasts a long time. A window of peace and prosperity in the region. We could be there right now. And President Trump is a driving force behind that. He's God's man for this time, to be the leader of the free world. That's exactly what he is. In an era when the Western world is going off a cliff. Look at the UK. My gosh, Tommy Robinson on trial again for terrorism charges, quote unquote. And I was just reading on Twitter, the UK government now, folks, get this. Do I have it still pulled up? Oh, I had this article pulled up. I just want to quote from this official document from the UK, the government of the UK, on who is a terrorist. Let's see if I can find it. Maybe not. Here it is. And Tommy sent this out. Terrorist ideologies. Extreme right-wing terrorism consists of people who believe that Western culture is under threat from mass migration and a lack of integration by certain ethnic and cultural groups. I guess I'm a terrorist, according to the UK. And Tommy Robinson said, look, the UK government now categorizes anyone who believes Western culture is under threat because of mass migration is a terrorist. This is England in 2025. So needless to say, Donald Trump is a breath of fresh air. And he's all that is really preventing Western, Judeo-Christian Western civilization, or what's left of it, from going off the cliff entirely. And Israel, by extension, which is in the middle of the Middle East, but is the first line of defense for Western civilization. Folks, you could argue that Western civilization was born 3,500 years ago on Mount Sinai when a Jewish man named Moses, an Israelite, received the 10 Commandments from the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So those are the stakes, and that's what we're fighting to defend and save. And President Trump on the world stage, he is the undisputed leader of the free world. Now, in a prophetic sense, I think a period of blessing for Israel and perhaps the world, perhaps the region, we could be there. And Israel, I think in many ways, is stepping into its prophetic destiny. God told Moses in Deuteronomy, you will be the head of the nations and not the tail. But you know that specter looming in the future, that Gog-Magog war, laid out in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, comes at a time when Israel is apparently living in peace. Ezekiel says, look, it's a land of unwalled villages. It's in a time of peace. Suddenly, this coalition forms. Turkey, Iran, I believe Russia will very likely be a part of it as well, and other Islamic nations, and they come against Israel in what Ezekiel says are the latter days. So, look, in the meantime, let's enjoy history being made. God was on the move yesterday, no doubt. And we could be entering a very exciting period here of peace and prosperity for all. But know that it's not always going to be peaches and cream, and never has been. There's still a lot of prophetic chess pieces moving on the board and then some. So we look ahead and we have wisdom and discernment on this channel, and we see what's coming. We know you do too. So we'll continue to bring the on-the-ground perspective for you every day here on The Watchman. Exciting times. Keep it all in prayer. Pray for those hostages, by the way, and their families. Pray for the hostages to recover, for them and their families just to be made whole again, and for God to just bless them. And God bless all of you. And until next time, remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.